Just hours ago, an American cargo plane was torn apart mid-flight.
At 5:15 p.m., a UPS MD-11 lifted off from San Juan, carrying high-value electronics and medical supplies worth more than $70 million, beginning what should have been a routine flight across the Caribbean. The aircraft moved toward its planned route over Venezuelan airspace, an area that had seen a sharp rise in airborne attacks, yet nothing suggested a threat was already in motion. What the crew could not see was a hidden network of surveillance equipment placed inside the jet long before takeoff, allowing a cartel unit with outside support to track every movement in real time. When the aircraft entered the corridor, 5 Igla missiles rose from the ground and closed in within seconds. 2 struck the fuselage at 14,000 feet, destroying the jet and scattering its cargo across the jungle below. This is where the investigation begins, and the events that followed would push the United States toward one of its fastest military responses in decades. If you want to follow how this investigation unfolds, make sure to subscribe to Military Power so you never miss the next update. The rapid identification of the explosion began with the wide network of American sensors that monitor activity across the Caribbean every hour of the day. The first alert came from naval radar, positioned along the southeastern maritime corridor, which tracked a sudden thermal bloom rising above the altitude normally associated with commercial aviation. The signal matched the intensity of an airborne blast measuring close to the energy release of 1.9 tons of TNT. This initial reading prompted the nearby naval stations to forward the data to regional command centers for confirmation, creating a chain of verification that forced analysts to react within minutes. The second confirmation came from 6 United States reconnaissance satellites that regularly scan the region. Their infrared instruments recorded a brief but concentrated flash at an altitude that matched a cargo jet's climb profile. The satellites detected multiple heat trails that converged toward the same point of impact, and these patterns suggested the involvement of advanced infrared guided weapons. Once the satellites aligned their timestamps with naval radar, specialists at the command center concluded that the event was not consistent with mechanical failure or accidental detonation. The system automatically flagged the incident as suspicious and raised the intelligence priority for immediate assessment. The third layer of information arrived from coastal sensor arrays that monitor the northern shoreline of South America. These arrays captured the location of the flash and placed it near an area previously associated with the movement of mobile launch units. The coordinates fell inside a zone where Venezuela had expanded military activity during the past year, and the incident matched several indicators studied by United States analysts. These indicators included the speed of the rising thermal signature, the narrow size of the heat plume, and the sudden disappearance of the aircraft's transponder signal. The alignment of these factors increased the likelihood of deliberate hostile action and reduced the probability of an isolated mechanical malfunction. Within a short period, automated systems inside the intelligence network began to categorize the data. These platforms compared the explosive signature to a library of known missile types, using algorithms trained to recognize fuel composition, detonation shape, and fragmentation patterns. The blast near the UPS aircraft produced a heat curve and debris spread consistent with man-portable air defense systems. The system also identified secondary heat markers that pointed toward a multi-missile launch rather than a single intercept. This meant the aircraft faced several incoming threats in rapid succession, which provided another indication that the event was intentional. This early assessment formed the foundation for the United States response. It linked the explosion to a hostile act and provided federal authorities with the justification needed to consider military action. The consistency of the evidence across Navy radar, satellite imaging, and coastal sensors allowed national command authorities to move toward the next phase of the operation with confidence that the strike did not result from an accident. The transition from detection to evaluation set the stage for a rapid national decision, and the momentum created during these first minutes shaped the actions that followed in the wider Caribbean theater. The United States shifted from analysis to action, once federal authorities confirmed that the aircraft had been destroyed by external weapons. The speed of this transition reflected the seriousness of the incident, because an attack of this scale required an immediate and coordinated reaction. National command centers reviewed the findings from their sensors and produced a unified operational picture, which allowed senior officials to authorize a rapid deployment order. This order activated Operation Iron Response, a standing plan designed to counter severe threats against American assets in regions monitored by Southern Command. The activation of the plan showed that the government viewed the event not only as a loss of life and equipment, but also as a challenge to national security in a strategic area. The first component of the mission involved naval forces already positioned in the Caribbean. USS Liberty DDG-108 received the instruction to prepare its launch systems for a precision strike. The destroyer carried the Mk-41 vertical launch system, which supports long-range cruise missiles capable of reaching targets across hundreds of miles. Its crew began the process of readying 4 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles, each carrying a 1,000-pound warhead and equipped with navigation systems that allow them to follow terrain and avoid detection. These preparations had to be completed quickly because the timing of the wider operation depended on synchronized action among multiple units. The destroyer's systems were brought to full readiness within the narrow window allowed for response, showing the efficiency of a vessel built for rapid strike missions. A second component of the operation unfolded at Curaçao, where air crews prepared 2 CH-47F Chinook helicopters for immediate liftoff. These aircraft were chosen because of their ability to carry heavy loads, operate at low altitudes, and land in difficult terrain. Each helicopter began loading personnel and equipment, including 50 Navy SEALs, assigned to carry out the ground phase of the mission. The teams brought M4A1 rifles, M141 launchers, communications equipment, medical kits, and 18,000 rounds of ammunition. The loading process required careful coordination to distribute weight properly, while also allowing the troops to access their gear during the flight. The crews worked within tight limits to ensure the helicopters could depart within minutes of receiving the launch order. The speed of the response became one of the defining features of the operation. 22 minutes passed between the moment the aircraft disappeared from sensors and the moment the first Tomahawk left its launch tube. This timeline exceeded the pace of many previous mission activations and marked the fastest coordinated strike of its type since 1988. The ability to respond at such speed relied on established procedures that link early warning channels to combat-ready units. These procedures allowed senior leadership to move from detection to retaliation without delays, which demonstrated the level of preparation maintained by United States forces operating in the region. The launch of Operation Iron Response represented more than a military maneuver. It showed that national defense systems could mobilize quickly when American lives and strategic assets were threatened. It also signaled that the government was prepared to use both precision strike capabilities and elite ground forces to restore stability in a contested area. This momentum carried the mission into its next phase, where the strike elements and the landing teams would converge on the target zone and begin the effort to secure the area and prevent further threats. The opening phase of the strike began when the Tomahawk missiles reached the target zone, identified during the initial planning process. Each missile had followed a programmed path that allowed it to descend toward the enemy compound with precision. The first detonation struck the large fuel storage area located on the outer edge of the stronghold. The 1,000-pound warhead produced an intense wave of heat that ignited thousands of gallons of diesel and created a fireball visible from several miles away. This blast disrupted the compound's internal power distribution and contributed to a blackout that affected more than 11,000 homes across the surrounding district. The disruption of local power lines created confusion among cartel lookouts who were unable to coordinate the early stages of their defense. The second Tomahawk impacted the radio tower positioned at the center of the compound. This structure supported the group's short-range communication network and played an important role in linking the fighters stationed around the perimeter. The loss of the tower forced the defenders to rely on hand signals and small radios with limited range. The collapse of their communication system made it more difficult for them to coordinate a cohesive response. Shortly after this strike, the third and fourth missiles targeted the escape routes located behind the compound. These routes had been used in past incidents to transfer supplies and to move personnel out of the area when confronted by security operations. The destruction of these paths reduced the number of available exit points and restricted movement inside the complex. While the missile phase unfolded, the airborne teams approached the area from the east. The two CH-47F Chinook helicopters maintained an altitude of approximately 300 feet, which allowed them to remain below the coverage of most surface-based detection systems. The aircraft traveled at a stable speed intended to minimize noise and vibration during their final approach. As they reached the designated insertion point, the crews began the process of lowering ropes toward the ground. The Navy SEAL teams used these ropes to descend in multiple directions and establish a perimeter around the compound. The arrival of the teams marked the transition from long-range strike measures to close-quarters actions. Once on the ground, the SEAL operators advanced toward the central structures of the compound where the defenders were regrouping. The cartel fighters employed weapons commonly associated with irregular forces in the region. These included the DSHK heavy machine gun that fires 12.7 millimeter rounds and several rifles chambered for 7.62 millimeter ammunition. The opening exchange of fire produced a series of intense bursts that echoed across the complex. The SEAL teams responded with controlled fire that targeted key positions where the heavy weapons had been placed. Their objective was to reduce the volume of incoming fire and to force the defenders to fall back from their initial positions. The engagement continued for 12 minutes and 40 seconds, a duration shaped by the compact size of the compound and the effectiveness of the initial Tomahawk strikes. During this period, the SEAL teams used M141 launchers to neutralize hardened positions that could not be reached with rifles alone. The use of the launcher allowed them to collapse sandbagged emplacements and small bunkers that protected the enemy's heavier weapons. This tactical advantage enabled the teams to move deeper into the compound and take control of several storage areas. The movement tightened the perimeter and pressured the remaining defenders. The final moments of the operation saw the ground units secure the remaining structures and clear the last pockets of resistance. The assessment conducted on site recorded the neutralization of 12 cartel fighters and the capture of 23 others who were unable to escape the collapsed escape routes. The teams also identified 6 destroyed vehicles and 3 storage buildings that had been rendered unusable due to the combined effect of the missile strikes and the ground engagement. Throughout the operation, the United States forces sustained no casualties, a result attributed to the coordination between the missile strikes and the ground movement. This success concluded the assault phase and prepared the way for the evidence collection efforts that would follow in the aftermath of the battle. The evidence collection phase began once the ground team secured the final structures inside the compound. This phase held significant importance because it allowed investigators to understand the nature of the group's operations and to determine whether the attack on the cargo aircraft involved external actors. The Navy SEALs moved through the damaged buildings with a systematic approach, focusing first on areas that had been used to store technology and communications equipment. Their initial findings confirmed that several rooms contained items linked to previous incidents involving stolen American hardware. The discovery of these materials indicated that the group had access to advanced systems and had developed methods to conceal them within the compound. As the teams continued their inspection, they located 11 crates that contained sensitive United States technology. These crates held specialized components designed for military communications and surveillance platforms. Among the items recovered were encrypted microchips used in naval radar systems. These microchips play a critical role in secure targeting and data transmission functions, and their presence inside the compound raised concerns about potential compromise of classified capabilities. The recovery of these components suggested that the group responsible for the airport attack had been intercepting and storing high-level technology for reasons that extended beyond routine smuggling activities. The search of the compound also led to the identification of electronic devices capable of disrupting communication signals. Investigators found equipment that emitted frequencies matching those recorded near the path of the UPS aircraft before it was struck. The characteristics of these frequencies aligned with known jamming techniques used to interfere with civilian and military communication channels. The condition of the equipment suggested recent use, and its placement near a control area indicated that the group may have relied on it to disable or distort signals as the aircraft traveled across the region. This finding added weight to the conclusion that the attackers attempted to limit the aircraft's ability to transmit distress messages or location data. A separate team within the operation examined remnants of missile components recovered from the battlefield. These fragments were collected from the debris fields created by the initial missile strikes and from areas surrounding the destroyed escape routes. Investigators studied the serial markings on these fragments and matched them to databases maintained by international monitoring organizations. The comparison revealed that several components originated from a batch of Igla missiles that had moved through a network spanning 4 countries. Records linked this shipment to financial transactions involving an account associated with a Venezuelan military officer. The account showed transfers totaling $12.8 million, which raised further concerns about direct involvement by individuals connected to the state. The financial analysis supported the forensic findings gathered from the missile fragments. Intelligence analysts connected the money trail to procurement pathways frequently used by groups seeking to acquire advanced weaponry. These pathways rely on shell companies, offshore accounts, and brokers who operate outside standard arms control regulations. The combination of these transactions and the presence of complex equipment inside the compound demonstrated that the attackers had obtained resources beyond the reach of most independent criminal groups. This level of access suggested coordination with entities capable of providing logistical support, training, and strategic guidance. The Department of Defense reviewed the collected evidence and compiled an assessment that integrated the technological, financial, and operational findings. The assessment concluded that the attack on the cargo aircraft could not be attributed solely to a criminal network. Instead, the presence of stolen military technology, communication disruption tools, and weapons traced to official channels indicated a broader structure behind the operation. The convergence of these indicators pointed toward an action supported by state-linked actors who had the capacity to enable the group's activities. This conclusion changed the nature of the incident from a regional security concern to an event with direct implications for international stability. The political consequences of the attack began to unfold soon after investigators established that state-linked actors played a role in enabling the strike on the cargo aircraft. This finding changed the nature of the incident because it elevated the event from a case of regional criminal activity to a matter involving international accountability. The United States government reviewed the evidence collected during the mission and initiated a series of actions designed to limit the ability of those responsible to support similar operations in the future. These actions reflected the broader need to protect American citizens, commercial activity, and national sovereignty in a region where strategic interests intersect with security concerns. The first step taken by Washington involved the implementation of targeted sanctions. Federal officials identified 3 Venezuelan defense figures whose positions gave them access to procurement networks and military supply chains. Financial records linked these individuals to transactions associated with the movement of weapons and equipment relevant to the attack. In response, the United States froze the accounts connected to these officials and restricted their ability to operate within the international financial system. The sanctions aimed to disrupt the resources used to facilitate covert operations and to signal that involvement in activities undermining American interests would carry significant economic consequences. A second measure involved increased monitoring of strategic locations within Venezuela. Analysts determined that two naval facilities along the northern coastline had the potential to host assets that could support further destabilizing actions. These facilities occupied positions that allowed access to maritime routes used for regional smuggling operations and for the movement of equipment capable of threatening civilian and commercial aviation. To address this concern, the United States deployed reconnaissance drones to observe these areas continuously. The drones operated throughout the day and night to produce real-time imagery and to track changes in activity patterns. This monitoring effort gave federal authorities better insight into the operational environment and reduced the risk of additional incidents. Diplomatic channels also experienced pressure as the implications of the attack became more widely understood. United States officials engaged with regional partners to share information about the evidence discovered during the investigation. These discussions focused on the importance of maintaining stable conditions in the Caribbean and on preventing the spread of capabilities that could threaten civilian and commercial aviation. By strengthening cooperation with neighboring states, American officials sought to reinforce security frameworks and reduce the likelihood of future attacks. The emphasis on collaboration reflected the recognition that transnational threats require coordinated responses. The combined effect of these political and diplomatic actions contributed to a reassessment of the regional security landscape. The measures taken by Washington demonstrated that the attack on the aircraft had consequences reaching beyond the battlefield. They showed that the United States possessed the capacity to respond not only with military force, but also with economic and political instruments designed to counter emerging threats. This multifaceted approach formed the basis for the final phase of the national response, which would evaluate the long-term strategic implications of the incident and determine the next steps in safeguarding American interests across the region. Operation Iron Response produced results that extended beyond the immediate battlefield. The destruction of 3 weapon storage facilities deprived the hostile network of equipment that could have supported further activity. Intelligence estimates suggested that these facilities held valuable assets that generated substantial revenue for the group. The elimination of these assets reduced potential profits by an estimated $48 million. This reduction weakened the group's financial foundation and limited its ability to rebuild its operational structure. The operation also disrupted 12 financial pathways that investigators linked to the flow of money across borders. These channels supported procurement, recruitment, and logistical functions for the network, and their loss represented a major setback for those attempting to maintain influence in the region. The success of the operation also highlighted the capabilities of the United States military forces involved. The Tomahawk missiles demonstrated the accuracy of long-range strike platforms designed to reach high-value targets without exposing personnel to unnecessary risk. The Navy SEAL teams showed the effectiveness of coordinated ground action in a high-pressure environment. Their ability to secure the target area in a short period of time reinforced the importance of specialized training and preparation. The combination of aerial, naval, and ground elements created a cohesive force that achieved its objectives without sustaining casualties, which underscored the strength of the joint response. The overall impact of the operation reached beyond the immediate loss and recovery cycle. It reaffirmed the principle that the United States would defend its citizens and interests regardless of the complexity of the threat. The operation demonstrated that a single attack could trigger a response capable of shifting the balance of power and reshaping the environment in which hostile groups operate. This reinforced the broader understanding that deterrence relies not only on military strength, but also on the willingness to act when required. The investigation may close here, but the message is clear, as the United States has shown its ability to act with speed when its people and interests are in danger. Share your thoughts and subscribe to Military Power to follow every new development.